The primary purpose of this study is to identify the frequency and occurrence of adults who provide supplemental food to Florida scrub jays living in urban areas. To fully understand the context of the problem sought to be understood by this survey, you first have to understand jay biology and the specific problem faced in urban areas. It's possible that many people in urban areas who feed Florida scrub jays simply don't realize the harm they may cause. Many avid birding blogs show pictures of jays landing on outstretched hands, on the top of a person's head, on photography equipment, and even on the shoulders. This may seem innocent enough, but visitors who aren't expecting a wild bird to land on their head could strike the bird in fear, or jays become acclimated to dangerous situations like being near roads and in yards where predators, even domestic cats, that can be deadly. These situations are likely only detrimental to an individual or localized population of urban Florida scrub jays. Researchers are finding the value of urban jays and their survivability are much higher than they once thought. In the early 90s, regulatory laws and protections were geared mainly to the larger wildland populations, but now we know the survivability of the urban jays with land management efforts is much higher than predicted. So understanding how this human behavior affects the urban Florida scrub jays is more important than ever. First, we need to understand the extent of the problem which is covered by this study. Friend or foe, who is feeding the Florida scrub jay? A study assessing the frequency and occurrence of adults who feed urbanized Florida scrub jays, Aphelocoma coerulescens, a threatened species protected by the Endangered Species Act. Presented by me, Elizabeth Powell, in fulfillment of PAD6700 Fall 0W63, sponsored by Dr. Romeo Lavarius.
Protect habitat for this endangered species. The Florida scrub jay is the only endemic species to Florida, and that means that they live here in Florida and they're found nowhere else in the world. They're related to jays, crows, and magpies, which makes them really, really smart animals. One of the reasons that scrub jays are on the federally threatened species list is because of their habitat. They're really specific to the habitat they require. They can't live just anywhere. They require these dry, scrubby, sandy, xeric oak areas. And this is called Florida scrub habitat. Small urban conservation areas like this are really important to protecting the genetic diversity of the species. When we grow birds here and they disperse to larger conservation areas, then their genetics can pass on, and that's important, and it means that we're contributing to the health and success of the Florida scrub jay and their protection. So scrub jays are considered an umbrella species, and what this means is if you imagine an umbrella and all the area underneath that, these are all the other species that are being protected when we protect a scrub jay. Things like the scrub lizard, gopher tortoises. Other species become protected because we're managing the habitat that scrub jays need. And because this habitat is endangered and because it's so rare now, anything that depends on this type of habitat needs all the specific requirements, things like regular fire intervals and disturbance, things that you won't find in other habitats. And so all of these other species can be protected underneath the one species.
The question that has not been studied to date is there a real problem? To what degree does human supplemental feeding occur in urban areas, and is human supplemental feeding widespread enough to affect the species as a whole? To an individual bird, any supplemental feeding causes harm. It potentially distracts that individual bird from performing its necessary life functions. Everything from sentineling to caring for its young or protecting its territory can be affected by the distractions of a tasty treat. And those are just a few examples. We may not know all of the negative consequences as they haven't been fully studied yet, but researchers likely want to spend their time and focus their energy on larger issues facing the species as a whole, like habitat quality, degradation and loss, genetic diversity, and preventing any type of widespread extinction event from occurring in the larger, stable wildland populations. The first issue with this topic that needs to be addressed is whether or not there is a problem. Through this longitudinal panel study, the theory is that there is an increased likelihood that people who reside within 1 mile of an active Florida scrub jay family regularly feed, either intentionally or unintentionally, Florida scrub jays. The study will consist of adults who live within 1 mile of an active urban Florida scrub jay family. The definition criteria for an urban Florida scrub jay family will be a territory with an active Florida scrub jay family pair that occurs within 20 miles of residential zoning of 4 units per acre with at least 50 homes. These families can be defined through jay census data and would likely consist of several counties. The goal survey participation would be 500 adults, preferably from different households, though each adult family member will be encouraged to participate. The control group will be made of adults within households that live more than 50 miles from any Florida scrub jay family. There will be an annual written survey as well as at least one phone call or in-person interview per year to ask any follow-up questions necessary. The survey period will be for 5 years or until the adult moves from the residence, whichever comes first. Survey questions will include basic demographic information and the following questions: the length of time at residence. In the last year, how often have you fed Florida scrub jays less than 1 mile from your home? In the last year, if you have fed Florida scrub jays, which of the following methods have you used? In the last year, which of the following food sources have you provided to Florida scrub jays less than 1 mile from your home? 2 additional true-false questions will be asked of the study participants in order to gauge their knowledge before and during and after the study. Those questions will include true, false, or not sure answers to the following 2 questions. The Florida scrub jay is protected species under the Endangered Species Act. True, false, not sure. It is unlawful to feed a Florida scrub jay or interfere with it in any way. Again, true, false, or not sure. Additional qualitative questions will be asked of survey participants, and the answers will use the Likert scale. These questions will help researchers determine future steps for additional research needed. If you fed Florida scrub jays, how likely would it be that you would stop providing food if you knew it would harm them? If you fed Florida scrub jays, how likely would you stop providing food if you knew there were law enforcement consequences like a fine or arrest? Beyond the necessary foundational understanding of the potential impact of supplemental feeding, human behavior studies may help land managers and researchers in their efforts to curtail negative human interactions with urban Florida scrub jays. Are we able to influence human behavior through reasonable education efforts, or is the threat of law enforcement action or social influence more effective? For future studies, understanding both the scientific understanding of the consequences to the Florida scrub jay as a species, as well as the human behavioral sciences needed to affect change, will be critical to successfully changing negative human interactions with Florida scrub jays in urban settings. By combining what we know factually in a way that presents that information to influence human behavior, there stands a good chance that urban Florida scrub jays may adapt and survive much longer than originally expected. For more information about the Florida scrub jay, I encourage you to take a look at Archbold Biological Station's website, as well as check out indianriver.gov/conservation for more information about urban Florida scrub jays and just scrub jays in general.
One of the most important things that we do for our Florida scrub jays here in Indian River County is that we're managing and monitoring the jays over a really long period of time. In order to do that, we have to know who's who in the scrub. And the way we do that is we put little bracelets or little bands on their arms. But how do you catch a scrub jay? Great question. So what we're going to do is we set a trap, a potter's trap, which is this one is a little fake trap that we're going to use. We work under the guidance and under the permit of a federally permitted issued bander. And that person actually gives us the authority to be able to do this. So nobody from home can do this, but we want you to be able to see how the birds get their bands. We set up the potter's trap just like you might expect. And it's baited with peanuts in the back. And then this little door would close whenever a bird goes into it. But birds don't always know just exactly how to get into the trap first go.